Let's go Ravens! What if the biggest winners of the Ravens offseason aren't the players everyone is talking about? Every year, training camp completely changes the conversation around this football team. A handful of players arrive with little attention, only to leave camp forcing everyone to rethink the depth chart. Some earn starting jobs. Others go from roster bubble candidates to key contributors. And sometimes, one incredible training camp can completely reshape expectations heading into week one. This year feels no different. While the spotlight naturally falls on stars like Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry, and Trey Hendrickson, there are several other Ravens quietly preparing for what could become the most important few weeks of their careers. In fact, there are a few names that could completely change the way fans view this roster before the regular season even begins. And after looking at everything happening behind the scenes, one thing becomes very clear. By the time training camp comes to an end, we may be having very different conversations about who deserves significant playing time. But before we continue, make sure you've already hit that like button if you're excited for Ravens training camp to finally begin. And I want to hear from the most optimistic fans in Ravens Nation. Leave this comment below. Go Ravens! Future stars are about to emerge. Now let's get straight into today's story. As training camp approaches, excitement continues to build because this is the point in the offseason where projections begin turning into reality. OTA practices and minicamp provide early glimpses, but everyone knows the real evaluations begin once the pads come on. That's when position battles become much more meaningful, young players have opportunities to separate themselves, and coaching staffs begin identifying who deserves larger roles heading into the regular season. One of the biggest storylines entering camp revolves around the center position. According to the discussion, this remains one of the most wide-open competitions on the entire roster. Danny Pinter, Jovan Gwynn, and Corey Bullock are all part of the battle, although Bullock's injury has limited what observers have been able to see during off-season activities. Based on everything that's happened so far, Danny Pinter currently appears to have the edge. The reasoning behind that prediction is straightforward. Pinter brings the most experience to the competition, and he's also viewed as an athletic player capable of handling the responsibilities that come with playing center. While it's acknowledged that replacing Tyler Linderbaum is a difficult task and that the position itself may not be stronger individually, there is optimism that improvements elsewhere along the offensive line could help offset that concern. In fact, the discussion points to the additions at both guard positions as one of the biggest reasons for optimism. Rather than focusing solely on the center battle, the expectation is that John Simpson and Vega Yawan will significantly strengthen the interior offensive line. Combined with the influence of offensive line coach Dwayne Ledford and offensive coordinator Declan Doyle's new system, there's confidence that the overall offensive line could perform much better than it has in recent seasons. Even if center remains the biggest question mark, the unit as a whole is expected to take a positive step forward. At the same time, the possibility of adding outside help hasn't completely disappeared. One veteran whose name continues to generate discussion is Garrett Bradbury. The conversation notes that Bradbury has extensive starting experience after spending several seasons with the Vikings before moving to New England and later being traded to the Bears. While there's curiosity about whether Chicago would eventually consider moving him again, the current expectation remains that Baltimore's competition will be decided internally rather than through another acquisition. As things stand today, Danny Pinter remains the favorite to emerge as the starting center by the end of training camp. Another player expected to generate considerable attention once the pads come on is Emory Jones Jr. His versatility immediately stands out. According to the discussion, Jones has experience playing both guard positions as well as right tackle, making him one of the most valuable depth pieces on the offensive line. While the prediction isn't that he'll win a starting job before week one, there is strong belief that he could become one of the team's most important backup linemen and eventually find himself starting games if injuries create opportunities during the season. What makes Emory Jones Jr.'s situation especially interesting is the comparison that was made regarding his potential role. Rather than locking him into one specific position, the expectation is that his versatility could allow him to move around the offensive line whenever needed. Those kinds of players often become extremely valuable over the course of a long NFL season, and training camp will provide his first major opportunity to prove exactly how dependable he can be. And if those early expectations become reality, don't be surprised if Emory Jones Jr. becomes one of the biggest names everyone is talking about before preseason even comes to an end. But the offensive line isn't the only position group where someone is expected to dramatically raise expectations during training camp. One of the most exciting names to watch over the next few weeks is Tez Walker. According to the discussion, Walker has already built plenty of momentum throughout the offseason, and there's a growing belief that training camp could be the moment where everything finally comes together for him. While Zay Flowers is firmly established at the top of the depth chart and Rashad Bateman is expected to remain the second option among the wide receivers, the opportunity sitting in front of Tez Walker is enormous. That's what makes his situation so fascinating. Unlike some players who need injuries ahead of them to earn snaps, Walker simply needs to continue doing what he's already been doing throughout the offseason. The discussion points out that he's consistently impressed during offseason activities despite receiving limited opportunities during the previous season. After finishing last year with only 6 receptions, there's a strong feeling that his role could expand significantly if he continues building chemistry with Lamar Jackson once full-speed practices begin. Another reason for the optimism is the belief that Walker's game continues to evolve. Rather than being viewed strictly as a vertical threat, he's described as becoming a much more complete receiver. His ability to stretch the field remains one of his biggest strengths, but the expectation is that he'll demonstrate a more well-rounded skill set once the preseason begins. If that happens, it becomes much easier to imagine him earning considerably more playing time than he has in previous years. The conversation also acknowledges that competition within the receiver room will be intense. Jacoby Lane and Elijah Sarrett are expected to generate excitement throughout camp as well, but the belief is that each rookie fills a different role. Elijah Sarrett is projected to spend more time working from the slot, while Jacoby Lane's size makes him an attractive option in contested catch situations and near the goal line. Because of those differences, the expectation isn't that they're competing directly with Walker for the exact same responsibilities. Instead, each receiver brings something unique to the offense. Perhaps the biggest factor working in Walker's favor is the arrival of a new coaching staff. According to the discussion, Declan Doyle enters this season without preconceived ideas about previous playing time or established rotations. Everything starts fresh. That means every receiver has an opportunity to earn his role based on what he shows during practices and preseason games rather than what happened in previous years. For Walker, that clean slate could prove extremely valuable. If he continues producing the way many expect, don't be surprised if his name becomes one of the biggest stories coming out of Ravens training camp. The conversation then shifts to another player generating significant optimism on the defensive side of the ball, TJ Tampa. According to the analysis, this could finally be the year Tampa takes a major leap. He's already flashed encouraging signs during previous offseason work, including practices where he came away with interceptions and pass breakups. Now, with another year of experience and a new opportunity ahead of him, expectations have become even higher. The belief is that Tampa has all the tools necessary to earn a much larger role than he's had in previous seasons. While Nate Wiggins is viewed as the clear top outside corner, and Marlon Humphrey and Ozier continue to occupy important spots in the secondary, the discussion emphasizes that there will still be meaningful opportunities for Tampa to contribute on the outside. Just as importantly, confidence in Tampa isn't based on projection alone. The discussion points out that whenever he's received opportunities, he's performed well. That's why there is so much excitement surrounding what another strong training camp could mean for his development. The expectation isn't simply that he'll make the roster, it's that he'll force the coaching staff to increase his workload and become a much more impactful part of the defense throughout the season. If Tez Walker and TJ Tampa both deliver on these expectations, they could become 2 of the biggest training camp risers on the entire roster. But they aren't the only young Ravens generating serious buzz. There's another defender whose name has been impossible to ignore throughout the offseason, and according to these projections, once the pads finally come on, the excitement surrounding him may reach an entirely different level.